So, Xavi Simons, he is the next transfer being spoken about for a few different teams, Chelsea being the main one right now. Things seem to be progressing, but what could Xavi Simons bring to the Premier League? What is his build? What sort of profile is he? And how could he sort of bring those, what attributes could he bring to the team is essentially what we're going to be talking about today. So, Xavi Simons, 22 years old, mainly an attacking midfielder, came through the ranks playing as that number 8, number 10, has actually played even deeper before, but is more of that attacking mid who can play on either wing, left or right. He's played on the right a bit for Netherlands. He's played on the left quite a bit for Leipzig, usually showing up in that left pocket, which we're going to speak about in a bit, to get the best out of his skill set. So, youth career, I think a lot of people know that have been following Xavi Simons from La Masia, had those early years, 9 years in the Barcelona academy, went to PSG. Again, a little bit more of a physical sort of embracing that physical side of the game when he made that move from Barcelona, very technical at La Masia, to PSG. He's found his way across to PSV, back to PSG again, didn't really get any games there, as you can see, 0 appearances. But then found his way to Leipzig on loan and then ended up there on a permanent. And he's still only 22 years old. He's progressing at a good rate and he's already had some big moments for both club and country. So, Xavi Simons, what can he bring? What are his best attributes? I've just got some sort of visual data here for you to sort of have a look at really quickly. But we're going to be speaking about some specific parts of his game and how he can elevate a team with his attributes, the strengths, the weaknesses, and all of the bits in between. So, this season heat map is from his time at PSV. As you can see, very central. He was playing as that number 10 and he could drift to both sides of the pitch. So you have that massive sort of area of where he's impacting the game, where he's got a lot more freedom to roam and affect both sides of the pitch. At Leipzig, both seasons, but this is 24-25, but if you look at his 23-24 map, very much the same. A lot more on that left-hand side dominant. You can see how much of that is on that left side. So it's a little bit more condensed to one side of the pitch. But again, you know what he wants to do. You know the zones that he wants to impact, and you know what he can do in those zones. So we're going to speak about, again, how can Chelsea or Arsenal, if they was the ones to get him, but we're going to focus on Chelsea, how could he get into those zones for Chelsea and how could they set up in the most optimal way to get the best out of him? So let's talk about his passing and creativity, because for me, probably his best trait. Now, not only can he just play simple pass, I think his weighted pass is very good. I think he can be a very sort of functional player to get the ball, move it on at a good weighted pass and make sure that he's finding players on a consistent basis and just giving them that constant feed of passes that they need. He's also very good at attracting pressure and playing through the pressure. So here, it's not as intense as maybe other games would be, but you've got 4 players sort of surrounded around him. He's managed to, again, dribble and find his way into those central pockets, which we're going to speak about a little bit later on. Find his way into there and play a pass into the forward with conviction. He's able to sort of take those risks. Something that he does is he's willing to take those risks. He's a creative passer and he wants to be the one making that pass through the lines. And that is something that Chelsea could use more of. Yes, we've got Enzo Fernandez, Cole Palmer, and these players that love to sort of make those risky passes as well. But it's one of those traits that you can never have enough of. And again, we're going to speak about exactly what he can influence and why it's a little bit different to the others. Now, this example shows the risk that he's willing to take with his passing, in my opinion, because you've got a very open right side of the pitch there. He could easily carry the ball forward himself or lay it out to the right so that he doesn't have to make the decision. But instead, he's going for that incisive pass through opposition bodies to play it through, and he wants to create that chance, and it ends up being a big chance. Pretty sure it ends up being a goal for Sesko. So that sort of shows it. And again, look how many bodies he's surrounding him in this area. He's able to wiggle and get into these really tight areas, which we're going to speak about a little bit more in the dribbling section of how he's able to manipulate these angles and really operate in those tight spaces. But then he's able to feed a really intricate sliced pass into the feet of the Leipzig, of his teammate, which again can result in a goal. So it's these moments where he can play intricate but risky passes and open up spaces for his teammates with lots of bodies around him and in crowded situations, which is key for Chelsea trying to get better against low blocks. Another big thing is the outside the foot pass. He opens up his own unique angles. He loves this pass. If you watch even just his highlights, you'll see this. Outside the foot, this ends up being a goal as well. A little outside the foot pass to Sesko, who then has an outside the foot shot, which goes in. I think a lot of you would have seen that as a highlight reel. Again, here's another one. it's not just the technique that he has to play this pass, but it's also the weight of pass. The weight of pass for this one was absolutely unbelievable. Again, just finding Tesco in that channel, players that are willing to make runs for him, he will find them. And because he can do that, he's quite dominant on his right foot for both these types of passes. And that's why you see him trying these outside the foot passes, maybe relying on them more than he does on his left foot. So that is maybe something to keep an eye on in terms of trapping himself on the outside on his left foot. But having that ability on his right foot to open up angles is a creative tool that he does have, and it is a very good one. Anything else that I had written down? The disguise on his passes are absolutely brilliant. Again, have a few stats up here. 2.10, so 2.1 key passes per 90, 2.5 passes into the penalty area per 90. These are two factors that for Chelsea you can't have enough of. You've got players, especially when you're playing against low blocks and you're playing in these tight spaces, players that can affect the game from inside the block by playing those risky passes, creating attacking moments for his teammates, but also making those passes into the box. Different ways to find box entries. Again, someone like Madueke last season or Gittins this season, you've got players who can power themselves into the box via carries, but you also want to make sure that you've got the ability to do it via passing. And this is something that Xavi Simons can do with that 2.5 passes into the penalty area per 90. That's something to keep an eye on, in my opinion. Now, one factor to keep in, so sort of like, again, if we're going off of strengths and weaknesses, one thing to factor into your decision making when thinking about this is the touch volume of our primary and secondary creators. If you haven't seen the video from yesterday, go check that out, where we spoke about sort of player roles in the attack, the 5 players, the creators, the primary creator, the secondary creator, the runners, and sort of the flex players, the fillers. So go watch that video if you haven't already, because this will give you a little bit more context as to what we're about to speak about. But with Xavi Simons, you can see 64.72 touches. He's a high percentile, 88 percentile touches player in the top 5 leagues. He wants to be on the ball. You've got Cole Palmer, who actually isn't on the ball as much as you would expect for somebody who is your primary creator. And Enzo Fernandez, again, in a little bit of a different role this year, dropping in and out of that pivot. Yes, he starts a little bit higher up, but he has the license to drop in a bit deeper, get on the ball, connect to play, and then burst forward into the box. But these are your two sort of primary and secondary creators in your attack. How can you get the touches that Simons needs to affect the game in a creative mindset and way without affecting the touches or the influence of Cole Palmer and Enzo Fernandez? Does it mean that Enzo maybe doesn't play when Xavi Simons does? Does it mean that one of their roles is adjusted and some of the touches are taken away? Does Xavi Simons have to adapt? These are things that you have to think about when you're talking about the touch volume, when it comes back to the stats that we were just talking about and how Xavi Simons and his creative numbers are quite good. You have to take into account that he is very touch dominant in the team that he's in right now. So you have to try and translate that to his new role at Chelsea. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not something that I think would be an issue because I think he has enough quality. And I think Maresca would utilize him in different ways. But like I say, it's not something you can just disregard. You do have to take it into account. Dribbling. Now, again, we spoke about this earlier, that ability to sort of operate inside the block, operate with many bodies around him, but also just shift the ball. Now, he can play that little intricate pass between the lines, but he also has that really quick footwork. In these areas, he's agile, he's shifty, he's evasive, really quick, small touches. This is something that I think comes from his sort of La Masia upbringing. Really, really quick, meaningful small touches to evade pressure and really just manipulate defenders. He's always in control of where he wants to be on the ball in that sense. And you can see that from when he's inside these blocks and he can wriggle himself free with those shifty movements. In this scenario, look how many players he can draw towards him when he's driving and sort of weaving towards the box to then just lay it off and find players in space. And you look at the amount of space he's sort of produced with a carry where he's not actually penetrating the block himself. He's getting to the sort of into the middle of the block. He is penetrating the block in a way. He's not going through it. He's going to the middle, this sort of soft spot of the block before coming back out towards one of his players to create their space for them. So he's creating space for other players. Imagine this is Cole Palmer. Imagine this is João Pedro. These sort of players that want the space, he can create that via other options, not just, again, having wingers that will stretch the pitch. So that's an impactful sort of resource to have. Ooh, what happened there? Now, this is one of my favourite things about Xavi Simons, because we're going to speak about this sort of the drawbacks with his athleticism in a little bit. But what I love about Xavi Simons and what I think is absolutely phenomenal of what he does, his ability to, a lot of people would call it ride contact, but I think it's smarter than that. I think it's the way that he shifts his body and puts himself ahead of the ball to put a defender on his back so that he's in control of the situation. Now, from this position, Xavi Simons, I think where he's a bit slighter and he's not as strong and built as other players, side to side, shoulder to shoulder contact, he is quite easy to sort of nudge off the ball and manipulate. And I think that is a weakness of him. And that's why, for me, he's better in central areas than he is out wide, because if he tries to go on the outside and somebody can get across him and sort of put the body across him, then he is almost 0% of getting that ball. Whereas what I think with this is where he can get ahead of the ball and he can manipulate his body and get the defender on his back to the point where he's now in control. Because with that defender on his back, the defender has to foul him to get back into control. He now can slow it down. He can use that defender on his back to sort of, like I say, slow things down, sort of try and bait these players to step up, the defensive line players. And again, create space. He can manipulate space, and he can also just control the tempo from these moments. And again, I think that's a key thing to have in a creator in the middle of the pitch. And this is something that he does extremely well. Again, that first touch inside across the body of the defender, because then he's got him on his back. Now he can slow it down. He can start to look. He's got runners off him. He can start to make his decision. Again, if he's going to be fouled, then the defender has to make a foul from behind him. If not, then he can slow things down, start to take his time, use that creative passing and that instinct that he has for creative actions by slowing it down, bringing it towards the box, and then making something happen. Maybe a defender jumps out to apply pressure to him because the defender behind him can't apply the pressure without fouling him. So then space opens up for one of the runners to run into. And it's these moments that I think Xavi Simons, that's why I think he's so much better centrally, because it makes up for his lack of physicality side-to-side combat when he has this ability to almost ride with players on his back. Now, this is what I mean when it comes to sort of out wide. I think he's easier to be trapped. A few stats. Successful take-ons are down from 51.7% in his PSV season, was 53.5% in his last Leipzig season, but it's down to 32.3% this season. Again, I don't know if this is due to being in wider areas a little bit more often. Maybe, again, it's just a down year for Leipzig in general as well, so that could play into it. In terms of drawing fouls, again, like we spoke about with having a defender on his back, he draws 2.21 fouls per 90, 2.62 the season before, so that's something he's always had in his game. So the main thing that I think I wanted to touch on and just speak about with this is really just mentioning that I think that now that Gittins has signed for Chelsea, and again, if you use Arsenal as another example, with Madueke, who they've signed, when you've got more pace and power on the outside of a block, adding someone like Simons is a good move to have them alongside each other, because he adds a little bit more on the inside of a block of those creative but also dribbling qualities that we've just spoken about. So that's definitely something to take into account. Just trying to make sure I haven't missed any of my notes here. Because, yeah, his acceleration is really, really good with his first 1 to 2 steps. And I think this really helps him in sort of, when he's in these situations, using that first burst, 1 to 2 steps to get ahead of the ball. And then when he does naturally slow down, because I think his top speed is nowhere near as good, it doesn't match his acceleration. His acceleration is much better in those first few steps. But then he's already in this position where he's in more control to be able to shift down. And once he does decelerate and downshift his pace, he is now in more control because he's got the defender on his back. So that's definitely like one of my favorite things about him. Bonus content. I wanted to do this as a separate thing. So now that we've spoken about how he uses his body to ride with a defender, this is my favorite goal from Xavi Simons. And we're going to speak about his goal threat and his shooting range and everything like that in the next sort of section, because, again, it's something that draws a lot of people's eyes. And most people's favorite Xavi Simons goal would be one of those goals because, again, they're the most eye-catching. But for me, this goal, where Xavi Simons, he's in this area, he's received the ball, there's some little intricate play in the inside of a block, and he gets the ball. What most players would do here is they try and power into that space because, look, you've got the space between the centre-back and the full-back. Good space to take one touch into and then try and get the shot off. But as we said, Xavi Simons, he knows that inside-to-side contact, probably not his best bet because physically he can get bullied. And also, that top speed isn't as good. So these defenders already got momentum moving in that direction, probably going to have a good chance of getting to the ball or blocking his shot. So what does he do instead? And this is what I love. I just think the IQ and that, and again, he used it in central areas when he's carrying, but he knows his game. He takes the touch inside because he knows that he's got a player running alongside here, which is almost blocking that other defender from getting across, that other central defender, number 24, I think it is here. He's now taking it away from the defender's momentum. And once he gets in front of the ball, once again, the defender has to bring him down if he wants to regain control because he's on his back and he can't get round him. So now you get to this scenario and it's just an easy goal. He can slot it through. The defender can't get across without making a foul, which would have been a penalty. And it's just really, really clever play to utilize those skills that we've just spoken about in the dribbling phase, but how he uses it in those goal threat chances, which brings us on to his goal threat. Because now, a lot of these that I'm just going to mention, he has very strong ball striking from range. Better goal rates in central zones is what we will say. And I'm going to show a few of the heat maps to the sort of shooting maps to sort of present that. But just a few sort of shots that you can see. This one where he just hits it first time on the half volley. Really, really nicely struck with his laces. This one again, coming across first time, but he's in the center of the goal and it gives him more to aim for. So that's something to take into account because he whips that really nicely into the top corner. Now with this one, again, it's another example, whipping it into that far bottom corner, but again, from a central area. Now, Xavi Simons takes 2.26 shots per 90 last season. 40.5% of his shots are on target, and he's overachieved his XG every year. For the last 3 years I looked at, PSV, both RB Leipzig seasons, overachieved his XG. Last season, he overachieved it by plus 0.15 per 90. So these stats, his efficiency when he does take his shots is quite good. Now, one thing to mention, again, disguise. I don't think I actually mentioned this in the passing, but his disguise with his shooting and his passing is really, really good. He's very able to disguise a shot going one way, cut it back towards the near post, vice versa, open his body up for the far post. He's got good disguise in both passing and shooting. Now, here is his PSV heat map. Not heat map, I keep saying heat map. Shooting map and goal map. As you can see, look at where his goals are coming from in comparison to his shots. Now, again, for PSV, he was playing more as a 10, so he was in these central areas much more. The angles of his shots were between the posts or between the 18-yard lines much, much more often. And again, his goals, as you can see, more in the box, a couple from outside the box, but right on the edge of the D. Here you go again. Bundesliga, his 23-24 season for Leipzig. Again, look at how many shots now are on this right-hand side. And again, coming inside and trying to present that whip and get that whip on the ball. I don't think he gets enough whip when he's coming in from these wide areas. I think he's much better striking with a bit more power. And you can see where the goals are coming from here. Much more central, the most wide. Again, closer to the edge of the D. He's not wide on this 18-yard box. And then again, this season, even more so. Basically, none of them pass that 6-yard line in terms of goals. Shot-wise, yes, he's getting a lot in from those areas still, but nowhere near as effective. So getting him into those more central areas rather than having to whip it from those wider areas is quite key if you want to get the most goal threat out of Xavi Simons. And I think this is a recurring theme, not just through goal threat, but through creative ability as well, and just getting him into those areas where he can affect the game more often than not, which is centrally. Pressing, again, I think this is just something really key to sort of touch on, because when we speak about the tactical fit, I think this is key. When we speak about the likes of Nkunku and Felix, who have failed at Chelsea in this regard, Xavi Simons here, he's pinned back in being the winger, he's pinned back, which is something you see quite a bit for quite a few teams now, where the winger will go all the way back and get pinned in by one of the offensive players for the other team or one of the defensive players going higher. But on this scenario, Xavi Simons knows where the ball's going to go and he's telling them to jump. He wants the opposite. He wants his teammates to do it and he's instructing. When he gets close enough, though, he jumps off of his man and he's intense and he's quick to go and win that ball back. He wants to affect the game off the ball as well as on the ball. He's intense. He's got good intensity, good aggression, and that tenacity really does help him in where he maybe lacks a little bit more of that physical trait. I think I've got it written down here. Makes up for his lack of physical strength by being persistent and intense. He's a bit of a nuisance with his off-the-ball actions. Again, high intensity in the counter press and the press, both alike. This scenario, again, Some players would maybe be a bit lazy here, but he's intense. And even though there's only 3 of them pressing the ball in this scenario, he sees this as an opportunity to press them against the sideline and force them into I think he gets a block on this, which wins them back possession. So he's intense with his actions, and this is something that Maresca will like. He's willing to go to ground to win the ball back as well. He's got that, again, that intensity, that aggression within him. 5.25 ball recoveries per 90 last season with 1.3 tackles per 90, as you can see here. Much better than a lot of the Chelsea, well, all the Chelsea attackers last season in terms of that defensive output. Leipzig are a high-pressing team, and they do work intensely off the ball. So, again, this can sort of factor into the stats. But when you use your eyes and you see what Xavi Simons can do and his behaviours off the ball, you could definitely see how that could implement into the Chelsea team. Even if those numbers didn't stick at the exact heights that they're at now, it would still be a pleasant upgrade within the team at Chelsea. So what is his tactical fit? Now, I think one that many people will talk about in the Club World Cup was how Nkunku played in this sort of pocket position when Chelsea were playing the 3-1-6. Nkunku also played off the left, coming inside in that usual 3-2-5 formation. But as you can see here, this could really work with Simons instead of Nkunku. Enzo going to the other side in that 3-1-6. And that's something that could happen here. As you can see, Nkunku is highlighted. Xavi Simons has that ability to be that secondary creator between the lines with Cole Palmer. He can drift into those central areas. He can operate in all of those sort of positions. He's very good for zone replacement football. He can interchange with his attackers. He can drop deeper, much like Nkunku does here, to receive the ball because he's got that passing ability from deep as well as from advanced areas. Now, he is a risk taker, so if he loses the ball here, you may have a bit of a trouble. But again, something a bit different with from João Felix and Nkunku with Xavi Simons is he will work much harder to win the ball back in this area. So you have that extra bit of protection with him off the ball as well. Now, that's the end of that PowerPoint. But if we go over to just speaking about on the tactics board, what he can sort of offer and how he could really affect this Chelsea team in many different ways. I think the first lineup to look at would be with him inside with Gittins on the outside. Now, this would mean that Xavi Simons is starting in the 10, Cole Palmer starting on the right, Gittins on the left. Now, Gusto or Reece James, if he's able to, but for this lineup, I've just put it as Gusto because I think he has more intensity to provide, again, if you've watched yesterday's video, that runners and creators dynamic. You want these wide players to be the ones that are affording space with runs in behind. And that allows these creative players to drop in and sort of operate between the lines, interchange between them, and really create those moments to attack. You've got a lot of different creative qualities in there as well. You've got really good passing qualities. You've got Simons, who's very good at carrying in the middle of a block. You've got Palmer, who can drift wide and create that double width with Gusto, and we saw that against PSG to very good effect. So I think you've got lots of different ways of hurting teams. Now, in this scenario, I've got Enzo here, but this could literally be Lavia. Enzo maybe doesn't start in this scenario. Like I say, there's lots of different ways to do this. This doesn't mean that Enzo doesn't play anymore. This doesn't mean that Simons takes Enzo's spot. That doesn't mean that sometimes it won't just be this and Simons won't play at all anyway. Like, this is so interchangeable. But one of the options, of course, is having this where Enzo can play deeper, and this does unlock his sort of longer range passing qualities, not only to find those runners in behind, but also to find those sort of in between the line passes to these players, because again, he's got that quality to do so. So this gives you different options. Now, one thing I would take into account here as well is to protect Enzo in this deeper position, which is something that Maresca sort of touched on before. Having the right profiles and right sort of work rates around him is obviously key. Cucurella, Simons, who we've just touched on, works hard off the ball, but also Gittins, who will track back and use that power. And I think he will be like really well suited to that. You've got good profiles on this left side of the pitch to protect Enzo in this deeper position. So that is something we could see more often next season. And lastly, like I said, the zone replacement, you could even see at points where Simons drops deeper. Enzo now has that ability to sort of run a little bit more in behind and really use that box crashing essence that he's got. So you could see that in sort of short bursts where you can see those zone replacement movements to help open up low blocks. So that's something to keep an eye on. If we go over to this next page, another option that we can talk about is, again, if we now make these lines, when we talk about zone replacement, look at these three players. Now, this is with Simons starting on the left, Palmer as the 10, and you've now got Neto on the right. Now, I think this is key because you still need that runner over here. But Cucurella would now be offering that also to make those runs in behind. But you've also now got this interchangeable triangle where Simons can go wide, Cucurella can come inside, Simons can stay inside, he can rotate with Enzo like we just spoke about. And there's lots of different rotations that you can sort of make, such as this, where that rotation and that side of the pitch in that triangle can really rotate the zones. And I think all three of these players could do that to really, really good effect next season in this scenario. Now, that might mean that you want another runner who can sort of specialize in that left channel. So maybe you play the lap, who can make those runs into there. And then you've got Neto as your runner over here. So you've still got two really good runners in the team. And then you've got Cole Palmer, who can sort of be isolated in this space over here. Oh, that's not a box. This is, because then he's got that space for him. So again, it's another thing where you've got so many different options to play around with. And again, we spoke about it before, but I'll just quickly get it up on the tactics board again. Where is it? Here's the option we spoke about earlier, where you can actually now have that sort of 3-1-6. And again, with Caicedo being there, you now know, and this is something we did last season against Southampton and Leicester, there's going to be spaces to exploit between these two positions. But if you know that Enzo started to work much harder last season, again, covering ground was never an issue, but I think he started to really sort of thrive a little bit better at protecting those spaces from here. Simons can now do the same, more so than a João Felix or an Nkunku. And Palmer as well will work back. But you've now got players who can sort of help to facilitate and help those. Again, Cucurella, he's going to work his arse off to get back as well. Neto, same thing. So you've got like almost wing backs in that sense. So it's really, really good with now the overall intensity that team will have, but also the tactical and flexible shape adaptability that you can use by having someone like Simons in the team. As long as you can get the runners around him and the right pieces around him to offset some of the weaknesses that we spoke about in terms of that physicality, especially when he's pinned out wide. So I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. Let me know your thoughts on Xavi Simons. Do you think he's the perfect player for Chelsea? This is very similar to how he could work at Arsenal. If we just really quickly, because I do have it here. If we were like, he could work at Arsenal in a very similar way. Like if he was to start on the left, then he could drift inside, have the left back push forward. Again, you can have it much like this. You can have maybe Rice like here and Ødegaard here. So you'd have a double. You'd have both these players between the lines. You'd need the overlapping fullback. Maybe that's not Skelly's best part of his game. The other thing you could do is, again, you could have Skelly in here, Rice still in here, but you'd have Simons out wide. Do you have the rotations to unlock that enough? I'm not so sure. But the other option is him playing instead of Ødegaard. And then let's say Madueke plays out wide to give you more power in transition. And now what you can actually do, get rid of that, is you can either play like this with two players between the lines, or something else you could do is, let's say, for example, I don't have him on screen right now actually, but let's say Timber pushed forward. You can end up with Saka inside. Let's say this is Ben White. And then you've got maybe Zubimendi dropping into the back line, and you've actually got a bit more sort of fluidity with this back five of Rice, Lewis Skelly, Zubimendi, and the rotations you can get in there to create that first five. So I think Xavi Simons, his fit for not only Chelsea but also Arsenal, makes sense for giving you flexibility and profile and attributes that you need to help against different types of teams. It just depends on, one, the price point, and two, whether the manager is willing to platform them in the best way that will get the most out of the stats and the attributes that we've spoke about in today's video. So let me know your thoughts on Xavi Simons, where you think his best fit would be, how excited you are for the transfer for Chelsea, and let me know all your thoughts. Please do subscribe and like the video, as it really does help me out. Leave your comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.